Hi, I'm Susan Stone, and I beat the often path by being obsessed with change.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we celebrate unique and exciting people and solutions to help us actually solve the problems of our world while at the same time solving our own problem of what is a meaningful career. Joining me today is Susan Stone, the CEO of Ubiquitous Energy, Inc., the world leader in transparent solar technology. Their patented tech is the world's first invisible electricity-generating alternative to traditional windows. That's right, not just windows, but theoretically any surface on any building or even any device can soon be generating power. I can't tell you how excited I am for this episode because of what it represents. It's mind-boggling. The company has raised over $75 million in funding to date, and for good reason. The number of windows and surfaces that could potentially be generating power means that this is one of the most exciting tools I've heard of yet to fight climate change in a meaningful way. So, here's Susan Stone, the CEO of Ubiquitous Energy. Well, welcome to the show, Susan. I think that based on your history and track record, you can actually say that that's true in your career. You have a wild story. So describe to us a little bit about the career arc. What is the broad strokes changes that you've made in your life to end up where you are now?
There's so many. I feel I feel like sometimes I'm like a circus freak. Like I just love change. And I think it's so powerful for me personally, for personal growth, for learning and curiosity. I just absolutely love change. And so
I mean, they're just coins. What's the big deal?
Well, they can, they're pretty useful. Quarters in the laundry.
The audience is like, unsubscribe. Sorry, everybody. No, continue.
Fine. No, I love change. I love learning. So what have I changed? I mean, I've changed so many different things in my life. I used to be an investment banker, and I left investment banking and moved to Alaska for a summer, and then was a ski patroller, and then went over to venture capital investing, and now I'm an operator as a CEO at Ubiquitous Energy. So it's a twisty, windy path, and I wouldn't change it for anything.
We can talk a little bit about the product, and from the outside, it's absolutely brilliant, because when I think of the future, there's two different versions of what the future can be. There's sort of a positive future and there's a negative future. I've always been fascinated with both, whether the dystopian side is Blade Runner, how the world can look bad, or even The Fifth Element, 100 billion Americans, he says, and some 100 billion of my fellow Americans, and or even Idiocracy. And there's a positive vision of what we imagine the future could be, where nature and technology are in harmony, and it's green, and we've got all these clean energy sources. And when you think about something as simple as transparent solar panels or windows that could be harvesting the solar energy, stuff like that feels so logical as an evolution for humanity in general on the positive side of what our future could be. Were there many different people that were doing this kind of tech before Ubiquitous Energy? Are there many competitors in the space, or is it truly original? And a corollary is, was it the vision of a future that helped you make that decision to actually take the leap and do this?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so I'm with you.
Nice.
I can dive into the dystopian
I love
world.
it. I know, right? It could be horrible.
I love that stuff. And sometimes I wake up and I'm like, are we living in one of these dystopian futures? No, probably
50-50.
not yet.
Close.
50-50, yeah.
Getting there, yeah.
Getting there. But hopefully we'll reverse the course here. I mean, look, I'm not a founder at Ubiquitous, but I was an early investor, and I spend a lot of time with our founders. And really this idea of transparent solar, of, really invisible solar, which that's what we do. It came about because these guys were trying to think about how to change the world and how to evolve solar technology to a point where it could be more widely deployed. And so this was a novel concept at the time. The company was founded in 2011, kind of at the moment of the invention at MIT. And the real underlying thought process was, why is solar not more widely deployed? What could be some of the blockers? Why isn't it everywhere, right? Because the planet's getting just like bombarded with photons all day, every day. So why we could plant, if we had solar everywhere, we could power the planet, no problem. So why are we not doing that? And they came to the consensus that it's because it's ugly, or a very specific design look, let's say, right? And so that it was just that jumping off point. Nobody, to our knowledge, had really in the past thought about trying to engineer molecules that selectively harvested in the infrared and near infrared spectrum, where a substantial portion of the power of sunlight is. And so once they removed that constraint of harvest every photon, they were able to invent these materials, or use existing materials to demonstrate that you could really make a transparent solar cell. And so from that launching off point, that's our patented technology. Our underlying patent is that concept of harvesting in the infrared and near infrared selectively. And from there, our team has developed our own proprietary materials, our own proprietary device architectures. It is a really interesting discovery process, because we do invent our own molecules to be able to accomplish this. So to answer your question of who else is doing this and who had been doing it before, there were folks that were trying to do built-in solar before. That was well treaded. I mean, that kind of gives you a sense for how excited building owners and developers get about being able to have truly integrated on-site generation, where it is indistinguishable from the rest of the building and you don't have to make design compromises. But no one had yet kind of released that design constraint of harvest as much as you can and focus on the infrared and near infrared. So yeah, we're a completely novel concept. There are, of course, folks trying to do it today, and kind of trying to catch up to where we are and what we're doing. And look, I think that just really gives you a sense for how exciting this concept is, and how transformational it really can be for our infrastructure if we allow solar generation from any surface that sees the sun, without any aesthetic trade-off. I mean, that's exciting. A lot of people want to do this. I think, and I promise I'm going to just stop in a second and take a breath. But the thing that I think is really critical to our path, that I think is going to be a challenge for some of the up and comers beyond our IP portfolio, is that we've focused a lot on working with industry to make sure that our product is manufacturable at scale. That is the key. Obviously. The product's got to be great, right? Like we can't have design or aesthetic trade-offs. We can't have performance trade-offs. But even if you solve those problems, if you can't manufacture it at scale, you're just not going to make an impact. And so while it makes our discovery process more challenging, because we have a very, very tight set of gates that we make sure every material passes through, and its manufacturability is a big one there, before it matures into one of our production formulations, that I think is the absolute key to unlocking this market, is manufacturability.
Well, it's all incredible. And anybody who's been paying any attention to solar panels in general knows that one of the common criticisms is that the typical unit that's displayed is a single family home. And we know that traditional solar panels are a very great solution for single family homes, because you can put it on your roof and it'll, roughly speaking, power all of your energy needs. But then the next aha gotcha statement is almost always, oh yeah, but what about apartment buildings where there's only one roof and there's multiple dwellings? And that's been a common issue to take into account, especially very tall apartment buildings or high-rise skyscrapers or these other buildings that may have a very small surface area on the roof itself. Is it feasible with this technology? Let's say there's a high-rise apartment building that each floor can generate via the window technology or the surface technology enough power for that floor all the way up and down an entire building?
Yeah, not yet. I mean, someday, once we have our technology matured toward, closer to what we believe to be our practical targets, I think we have a path to being able to mature our efficiency to the point where it's roughly as efficient as silicon panels are today. We're still new at this, so we're about 20% the efficiency of silicon panels, and so yes, we will get there. Today, we're about rough, depending on the building, about a 10 to 30% offset for the building's energy needs. And that's assuming a really conventional building. So not a building that's, particularly optimized for energy efficiency. On the other hand, side of the equation, we're all working really hard to electrify as many buildings as we can. So, a little bit of a push and pull and a balancing act there. But 10 to 30% of a building's energy needs is really an enormous offset, and is a very useful amount of power.
Absolutely.
Particularly in situations like you mentioned, where there's not rooftop space and there's just not a potential for other renewables.
Do you see certain buildings as a great candidate for this? Just thinking off the top of my head, the Louvre comes to mind, a giant pyramid made of glass. Are there certain structures that you look at that you think, oh, that would be a great candidate for this technology better than others that might just have a few windows scattered in a brick wall?
I'm a little bit of a glass nerd these days, so I look at pretty much every building and dream about it generating electricity.
Right.
I mean, look, the more glass, the better. That's probably obvious. For us, that's the real answer, right? The more glass, the better. For us, as we move into production, right now we're in, and I'll give you a sense for where we are. We're in pilot production today. We have a pilot production facility in Redwood City that we use primarily for R&D and process development. And we're raising capital right now to build our first factory. Our first factory will be high volume. It'll allow us to do floor to ceiling glass. So that's what unlocks the big glass skyscrapers. Cool. And we have had this beautiful revolution, I think, here in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act that gives really, really juicy incentives to building owners and to residential customers for employing renewables within their building envelope. And that has opened up this space to us of, we are so cost competitive to traditional glass with those incentives that now building owners who didn't build with a lot of glass are actually considering adding glass to some of their buildings. So 6 months ago, I would have told you, the more glass, the better, and that's the target. And now, we're actually being able to move the needle on how much glazing goes into a building. And that's just incredibly exciting because I love windows. I love daylighting. I like to be able to see outdoors.
Is there a limit to how big one of these pieces of glass can theoretically be? Could it be 30 feet by 20 feet, or does it have to be broken down into smaller chunks?
No. It's right now we're limited by our tool set. And that's just the reality of the bigger the tool, the more expensive it is, and the more expensive it is to run. So when I said the factory will make floor to ceiling glass, so that's 5 foot by 10 foot. That's a pretty big piece of glass. Yeah. The industry today makes glass about 2x that size available to the market. That's a relatively small piece of the market, but call it 10 by 20 ish. Our technology doesn't care. I mean, I think that's the most exciting thing, is that not only does it not care how large the surface is, we have engineered it so that we don't have transmission losses over a large surface area. So it is, almost infinitely scalable at different sizes. It also doesn't care what we coat. So we're going to market for architectural glass because we can make such a big impact at such a big market. I mean, there are 20 billion square feet of window glass installed around the world every year.
Wow.
That's around the globe. I'm going to throw a few numbers at you, but that's around the globe 100 times.
Great. Yeah.
And boy, are we accelerating our building. I mean, building stock is supposed to double by 2060. And that means, okay, wait for it. That means we're adding the equivalent of a New York City to the planet every month until 2060. So, right? And buildings produce a ton of carbon emissions. So, we have got to do absolutely everything that we can. But to go back to what we don't have to coat glass. So our materials are the fundamental technology, and they don't care. So now you can imagine other surfaces. Coat a flexible substrate that you can see through and lay it over your roof so that you don't have to compromise roofing aesthetics. Wrap your car so that your car can harvest sunlight. put it into the display stack of your iPhone or coat the back of your iPhone so that you can use it for emergency power. I mean, we can actually make a real impact on being able to get an emergency signal out by putting your phone in the sunshine. So I get excited about all those future applications as well.
That's incredible. And it's funny because I can't remember when 15, 20 years ago, a thought came through my mind before I was as educated as I am today from talking to brilliant people such as yourself. But the thought came to my mind that there's energy all around us because we're a giant ball, we're spinning, we're hurtling through the universe at incredible speed. There's the sun. And I was reading articles on Wikipedia about species energy consumption, and you get to those types of civilizations. Type 1 civilization is one that can harvest all of the energy of their planet, and then type 2 is a civilization that can harvest all of the energy of their nearby star, and type 3 is one that can harvest energy from their entire galaxy. And then you learn about these things like a Dyson sphere, a theoretical structure that could encapsulate the entire sun and just harvest all of the solar energy. And I had this sense that there's just so much energy that the thought that I had was, I don't imagine how energy itself could be something that would ever be in short supply for our species. It just seems like there's too much of it. Now, other things for sure, water and certain minerals and resources, that I can easily imagine. But I always kind of intuitively felt that energy wasn't going to be a long-term human problem. Do you feel that that is the case? I know that storage is a problem, but...
And storage is a problem we're starting to solve, right? I could not agree with you more. We have an infinite renewable. Infinite to my mind. I guess there is some point down the road where our sun will die.
Right?
But to me, that's like infinity.
We'll be engulfed. But we'll have more power up until that very second because the sun is expanding. So it's not going to go down until it kills us. It's going to go up.
Exactly. It's going to go up until it kills us. No, I feel exactly the same way. And that is what makes me hopeful and excited. And I think we live in societies, we get entrenched in patterns. We have an entire planet of infrastructure that relies on fossil fuels. And, the idea that we are going to switch away from fossil fuels tomorrow is nonsensical. It is not going to happen. It just isn't. And so we're on the path to transitioning 100% to clean renewable energy. I mean, we have wind, we have geothermal, we have solar, and if we can get solar widely deployed, you're right, that's all we need. The sun is just giving us energy all the time, right? Just donating it to us, essentially. So I couldn't agree with you more. And we're on that path. I'm absolutely confident we're on that path. And you mentioned storage, which is the key to unlocking that. Storage keeps getting better and better and better. And, folks, you use that residential example that you gave of course, you should put solar panels on your roof. It just makes such intuitive sense in a residential setting. For me, it didn't really make sense in a residential setting until storage caught up, because I love the idea. We have solar at our house. We have 2 Tesla power walls, and I just love the idea of the house being it's self-sustained.
A self-contained unit. It's the coolest thing in the world, right?
Cool, yeah.
That's going to be one of the greatest joys of our time, I think. For
me it is. How many times do you think I check the Tesla app a day to see how my production's looking relative to use? And now I'm one of those people that I run around unplugging the vampires because I want to see, it's like a little, what's my personal best low on how much electricity we've used relative to how much we've generated that day.
Are there some surprising ones, not to get off on too much of a tangent, but are there some surprising energy vampires that you noticed that you might not have realized? I mean, we know that refrigerators, air conditioner, we know the big...
I don't know if these are surprising, but I think monitors, TVs, computers, things that have standby mode like that, gaming consoles, and some of those gaming consoles are better than others. But I think I always knew that they were vampires, things with standby mode, but I don't think I really realized the order of magnitude until I did things like, I used to be one of those people that I would just leave my laptop, which I'm on today. I use my laptop just kind of plugged in because it was sitting on my desk, and now
I'm guilty of that. Okay.
Once you
Laptop is a
get
big
your
energy vampire. So, since you're in this space, and one of the premises behind me starting the show was to seek out stories of people that were doing things that I admired. In a world full of people that are doing things that we may not like or we may disagree with, I wanted to seek out people who are actually solving these problems instead of just complaining about them. So there's sort of two sides to this spectrum here. On the one hand, you have people like Greta Thunberg, who is just saying, we need to stop society right now. We have reached a dire, catastrophic point in time. The only thing is activism. There's greenwashing is one of the worst problems. And there are people who are treating this as an absolute emergency. We need to shut down the government. No new oil, no new nothing. And then there are, of course, a middle area of people who just aren't concerned at all with any of these topics, who aren't even interested in them. But then there's this other group of people who are doing kind of what you're doing, which is trying to create a company or trying to build these changes in a more, I say insidious, but in a positive sense, in a way of a surreptitious way of injecting these things into society via companies and via eco-capitalism or whatever you want to call it, who are saying we need to build these things in a way that works within the infrastructure of our society as it is currently set up. Do you believe that more positive path can work, or do we need both that and the fear side? Are they incompatible with each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I hope that we get to a point really soon where we don't need the fear side as much. I do think, and I guess I'll challenge one of your original premises was that we got these,
Sure.
big group of people in the middle who don't care. I'm not sure that's true. I think that group of people who don't care is actually pretty small. But I think it has just an interesting complexion of people who care but don't know what to do, care but feel helpless, care but don't know how to name it. And so instead it feels like, fear of their home flooding, or, if you live in California like you and me, fear of wildfires and earthquakes and smoke and, drought, our stuff, our demons. So I do think that there is a much bigger portion of the population who really does care and wants to take action here if it's available to them. I think sometimes the fear side can push those folks into inaction or, into that hopelessness. So while I think it's really useful for calling attention to the problem and the urgency, I do think it kind of has can have a negative side effect. So I'm hopeful that we can move beyond that soon and just, acknowledge that this is a problem that we're collectively working to solve.
Yeah.
And so that's where I want to focus is on solutions. I'm like kind of an eternal optimist. And so I see a problem and, I want to name it, right? Because unless you have a problem statement, you have no idea what you're going and trying to solve. But, let's quickly get to a problem statement and then let's start working on solutions. And the only way we're going to do this is if we have collective action. So for me and for our team at Ubiquitous Energy, that means don't ask people for radical change. We don't ask our supply chain or value chain for radical change. I'll use our partners at Andersen as an example. Andersen Corporation, they're America's premier window brand. They're an investor in Ubiquitous. We're developing product together for the residential market. And one of the things that we did that I think, really helped them get comfortable with us as a new technology is we use the same product construction. We use the same manufacturing equipment as their existing suppliers. We're integrated into what's already an existing standard window coating. So they know exactly where we go on the glass. They understand where we belong within the product stack. And so those things, they were intentional. And that goes all the way through the customer, right? Like our windows, they have to look like windows. We don't want to ask people, yeah, you can help us save the planet by, generating renewable energy by your windows. The only thing is you're going to have to give up like 50% of your, like, they're going to be really tinted or they're going to be colored or,
Right.
They're going to have silicon in them. You just have to like look past them at
Right.
the view. That's not going to fly. And so, I mean, just like Tesla made a beautiful vehicle that's a really useful vehicle that everyone wants to drive, that's how I see solving this problem is, let's take advantage of all this embedded infrastructure and our embedded behaviors and just improve upon these things. So it's like it is transformational and revolutionary. But I don't know if I would use your insidious word again, because it has these.
No, it has such a negative. I know. I knew we were going to circle back to that. I was thinking,
you're right. It's kind of sneaky. It's like feeding the kid, like, when they bake the brownies that have like vegetables in them to give to kids.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Right. It's sneaky, but in the best possible sense. A Trojan horse, or whatever you want to call it, or a hook, or it's the clickbait of the eco world. You got to get them in somehow. And I think you brought up an excellent point. And, when we talk about the common person, which is always a dangerous thing to do, it doesn't exist. But you mentioned that, okay, climate change is an abstract thing. Global warming is an abstract thing. Well, tell that to the people who in Fort Myers whose house just flooded. They know that sucks. They know that your house being flooded is awful and all of the hassle that you have to deal with that. So on the one hand, you say, hey, we should adopt solar technology. Yeah, who cares? We don't want radical change, to your point. But another thing that I've heard, and again, especially in California, but also all over the world, and especially with the Ukraine, Russia, and the gas crisis that's sort of brewing in Europe, is people are looking at their electricity bill here. It's like, oh my God, $900 utility bill. What? And they know that that's expensive. And they say, I can't afford to send my kid to daycare because my utility bill is so high. And that $900 is coincidentally exactly the price of what daycare would be, more or less. So if you can say to these people, well, solar panels will offset that, so therefore your utility bill could be zero. And I've talked to people who are making tech that you can harvest water from the air. It's conceivable that your utility grid bill could be zero. Your water is covered personally within your home unit, and so is all of your power. So you say you're saving the money. And I think along those lines, hey, you could install these windows or these surfaces, and that's going to reduce the costs coming out of your pocket. That seems to me to be a very, let's say, catchy idea that almost anybody can relate to. Or the next iPhone, like you said, is coated in the substance so that the battery lasts 30% longer by virtue of it just being in the sun, or emergency power. Who would say no to tech like that? If Apple put that out there, people would say, great, that's awesome. I doubt that anybody would complain about that. So for me, this world seems to be the more exciting headspace to live in, that world of possibility, and versus the doom and gloom that if I'm being very honest, I was in much more of that headspace a couple of years ago before I started this podcast and talked to people like you.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I'm happy to be a part of, helping you shift your thinking. And I hope a lot of us shift that thinking. I mean, this is a really solvable problem. I work with an executive coach, and I cannot recommend coaching enough. I'll just, give that little plug. He's fantastic and works with our whole organization. And I just think, people who are working on problems all over the world, we deserve coaches to help us be our best selves. And he likes to use this phrase that it's simple but not easy. And I think that is really how I see this climate change problem. It is in some ways very simple, to your point about the fact that we have this like endless source of renewable energy in the sun. But it is not easy. It's not easy to change things that we've been doing for a really long time. It isn't easy to develop products that, can be mass produced and can be scaled and sold around the world to really make that impact. And, there is urgency. So to go back to that fear thing, that helps us with the urgency. But it's going to take time. And I think that is part of the challenge as well, is that we certainly as an American society, and I think this is, through Western society, I think this is pervasive, is that we have we can be short-term thinkers, and sometimes for good reasons, to your point about, not being able to pay for childcare, if it's childcare or heat your house or food or heat your house. I mean, that's intense. And I think it is not fair for us to ask people to make those kind of trade-offs. And at the same time, we need to be installing renewable energy today in Europe so that 10 years from now, and Bill Gates said this, a few weeks ago on a podcast, so that 10 years from now, there is not even a thought of reliance on Russian natural gas or natural gas at all. And I think being able to balance those two perspectives and serve both, I think is really, really challenging. And I think it's challenging for government, because that's really where a lot of this change has to be born, is at the government level.
It's deeply exciting, and we're all going to find out. I cannot wait to see what the future holds for you and for your company. I know it's going to be incredible. There are going to be some massive partnerships just around the corner, I can tell, and soon this genuinely will be ubiquitous. I'm quite sure of that. You're going to live up to the name. It'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy, no doubt. It's just a matter of time.
Everyone's going to know how to spell ubiquitous.
What?
I said everyone's going to know how to spell ubiquitous.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, that might be the most optimistic claim you've made so far. But of all the other things are possible. But that one, I don't know. To be determined. But it's incredible. Your story is incredible. I'm so grateful that you did take the leap and take the plunge, and that you've done that and you've committed yourself to this. It's awesome. Keep on going. You're doing a fabulous job. It's super cool. If you would like, you can either offer a parting word of wisdom here, or you can direct people to any end that you see fit. So take us away.
Wow, that's a heavy ask. I think my best advice to anyone, my wisdom I would love to impart, is be curious, be optimistic, and get on the path of hope. There are already a lot of us on it, so come join us. Get on the path of hope and be part of the collective action here.
Well, what a fabulous way to end it. I can think of no better words, so I won't even try. Thank you so much, Susan. It's been an absolute pleasure. And with that, the official podcast is over.